Everyone has their story. Your mother's memory about playing with a Ouija board when she was younger. Your father's recollection of hearing noises while camping in the woods with friends. Your siblings' tales of goblins and ghouls that you know deep down were only told to scare you. My dad had one before he passed about a terrifying and ugly demon who lived in our family mansion for 17 years. Jacob, my older brother. But all jokes aside, I'm here to talk about mine. It was around 2015, sometime in October. That year was particularly painful for my family as my father had finally lost his battle with cancer that spring. He entrusted his estate to me, his only daughter, as I was set to take over his position in the family company. To make a long story short though, I let my brother Jacob, his girlfriend, Veronica, and dog Zeus room with me at the mansion. The last thing I wanted to do was sulk around, all alone in Dracula's castle before my own inevitable demise. Even though it was spacious and probably worth more than the planet itself, there was always something so off about it. Rather, something was so incredibly off about the surrounding town, Dark Hollow. Even the town's name feels straight out of some Stephen King novel. There our estate stood, looming over the foggy, sleepy town perched upon the mountain like a gargoyle, prepared to feast on unsuspecting prey. It was particularly foggy driving up through the dense woods. Upon leaving the last few remnants of green foliage behind, the jagged curves and edges of the Kramer estate pierced through the melancholic moonlight. All was normal that night, driving up to my childhood home. Yadis, the maid, and her husband Uzziah, our groundskeeper, were just leaving for the night. Exiting my car, the air meandered in a silent waltz with the amorous fog engulfing the land. That silence, however, it felt visceral and insidious somehow. I had no tangible reason to worry, but I couldn't help feeling as if I needed to hurry inside. While rummaging through my keys under the stone archways, I finally spotted it. Sitting atop the welcome mat laid a simple CD. It announced itself in red print. The Lamb. Curiosity clawed its way up the forefront of my mind. That persistence led me to a decision I'd regret for the rest of my life. "What's this?" Veronica asked as I sauntered into the foyer. "It's the Lamb," I teased while presenting the disc to Veronica and Jacob. "It was in front of the door when I got home. You guys didn't see who dropped it?" "Nah, I didn't even know someone came today," Jacob admitted whilst Veronica nodded. My eyes fixated on the strange item now in my possession. "Hey, Jake, can you get my laptop from the kitchen?" Veronica sat with me in the living room, and Jacob wandered in with my laptop. I took the laptop from his hands and shoved the disc into the player. To be honest, I don't fully know what I expected. Maybe some awful local artist's mixtape or something. But a video was the last thing on my mind for some reason. The laptop screen lit up with the static remnants of what was obviously once a VHS tape. The crackly screen occasionally gave way to a viewable image of a nun playing an acoustic guitar to a group of children. She kept singing the song, "Tonight You Belong to Me," a slightly creepy in retrospect oldie, almost as if she was on repeat. "What kind of fuck-ass prank is this?" Jacob bellowed as Veronica and I laughed at his intrusion. But just before I ejected the CD and cleared my laptop of any potential viruses, Veronica noticed something. Her face. The nun in the video began to lose something about her. Almost like her essence of humanity seemed to disappear. The only way I could describe it nowadays is as if her face slowly started to become AI generated, moving in unnatural and impossible ways. She no longer sang her song, but some demented version of it, like it was stuck on a short loop somewhere in the beginning and reversed. That was around the time I removed the CD and tossed it in the garbage. The next couple of days were fairly normal, what with Jacob being away for work that week. Although I do recount the unexplained bumping and knocking at night that I could only rationalize away as the old mansion settling. Garbage day eventually came around and off our trash went to the dump. That day definitely had a few more odd creaks around the mansion than normal, but nothing that rang any alarm bells. It was roughly around 2 o'clock in the morning when I felt Veronica nudge me awake. "Get up," she hurriedly whispered whilst tugging my arm. "Huh?" Before I could even move, she all but yanked me out of bed. "Where's my gun?" What do you need a gun for?" My eyes finally adjusted to the pitch black. Her eyes stared back at me, displaying only primal fear. "There's someone in my room." It felt like my heart just ceased, like there was a giant cavity where it should have been. I quietly grabbed the handgun from my nightstand and wandered out into the murky void of the hallway. The moonlight was no longer melancholic as it slithered through the window panes. Its malicious tendrils created unholy shapes out of the things in the dark. We silently reached her room, and I slowly grasped for the handle. Each crashing creak of her door sent chills down my spine, alerting my brain of some impending doom. Her room was as silent as a crypt, but in no way did it feel as lifeless as one. Veronica flipped the light switch on, and we scoured her room for anyone who might have been there. Nothing. She sighed out of relief as we left her room. But before I could even turn to face her, something clawed its way through the still air of the mansion's winding corridors. Creak. I hauled ass downstairs towards the noise, making my way through the twisting and oblique hallways, gun in hand. Veronica and I stopped in the kitchen, staring intently at the now wide-open back door. Sitting there on the kitchen island was a single small desk. The lamb. Veronica got on the phone with the police as I closed and locked the back door. We turned on every light in that damn mansion and watched cartoons in the downstairs living room whilst waiting for the cops. The officers must have arrived 20 or so minutes later. We greeted Officer Reynolds, a pale man who looked like he did bodybuilding on the side, and Officer Carmichael, a friendly woman with darker skin. Reynolds and Carmichael did their rounds through the mansion, finding nothing. I remember Officer Carmichael talking to us, while Officer Reynolds seemed fixated on something in the backyard. Officer Reynolds told the three of us that he would look outside, while Carmichael continued taking our statements. It must have only been around 20 seconds until all three of us jumped at the sound of Reynolds slamming the back door. He walked into view visibly shaking, with his skin even paler than before. "We need to leave," he uttered to Carmichael. And just like that, the two of us were left alone with that god-forsaken house. Needless to say, Veronica slept in my bed that night with Zeus. Have you ever just felt like someone's watching you, even if no one's there? That's what the next day was like. Constant eyes peering from every shadow in that damn mansion. It was only made worse by Zeus's newfound interest in the vents and closets. He'd give them his little sniff-spections and then just stare. Even the allure of treats couldn't break him from whatever was entrancing him. That day I tried going about my routine as best I could. I cleaned the east wing of the mansion with Yadis, cleaned the music room, and I locked it up. Made a little breakfast, took Zeus outside, watched TV, and then locked the music room up. That day was also accompanied by the occasional banging at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Always in threes.
Jacob's going to be gone an extra 3 days.
Veronica alerted whilst I closed the music room door for what seemed like the 10th time that day.
You told him about last night's little spook, right? Yeah. And of course he thinks we just spooked each other being alone.
She giggled, but I could still see the terror in her eyes.
You're welcome to crash in my room for the time being.
That house was already eerie enough, as is prior to the lamb showing up. A mansion that felt as old as time itself. Its architecture twisted and turned, as its cavernous hallways felt like they led into endless voids of shadow. The foyer opened like a castle into a dark unknown as the chandeliers leered over. Those open cavernous rooms carried the echoes of those 3 knocks as the clock struck midnight. Veronica perked up from the ottoman she was lounging on, her nose no longer buried in the Brandon Sanderson novel she was reading. We stared at each other long enough to communicate without a single word spoken. Who the hell was at our door at this time of night? She lunged from her seat and ran towards the nightstand, grabbing the handgun. I clutched onto the bat from my closet and we both wandered through the jagged halls of murky black. The both of us quietly crept across the carpeted landing of the grand staircase and traversed down into the foyer. The front doors loomed before us, their haunting windows gazing upon us both like prey. But the strange part is how nothing stood outside in the misty moonlight. Nothing was at our door. I should have called the cops again as a precaution, yet I felt silly entertaining that idea with nothing being at the mansion. Veronica huffed as the shape of her white nightgown fluttered back up the staircase. I quickly followed suit. We were back within the dim marmalade light of my bedroom within a matter of seconds.
Should we call the psychic?
Veronica rubbed her hands together as worry plastered her freckled face. I meandered over to the vanity, bags staining the underside of my eyes.
Don't tell Jacob, he's so going to make fun of us.
Knock, knock, knock. I felt the blood freeze under my skin. Veronica stared at me with a crazed panic seeping into her eyes. It wasn't at the front door this time. It was at my bedroom door. My fingers ached from the frost that now enveloped them. Zeus stood and stalked towards the bedroom door, the hair down his back sticking straight up like spines. I slowly stood from the vanity with the bat as Veronica readied the handgun. My trembling hands threw the door open as Veronica took aim out into the nothingness of the mansion's vast hallways. The hallways lingered with emptiness, but that presence from the night before persisted. I don't know fully what it was, but both of us had the feeling that the door needed to be shut, and we needed not to speak of what just happened. Something was playing with us, or was it taunting us? Either way, giving it the attention it sought would have only made it more active. We simply tried our best to sleep. Every howl of wind outside woke me. Chairs morphed into things in the dark corners of my room, and every snap of the house settling echoed like footsteps down the hallway just outside. The next morning I met with Yadis and cleaned the west wing. I put my books back up on their shelves, replacing the tablecloth in the dining room, vacuumed the game room, and put my books back up on their shelves again. Night eventually rolled around and I said goodbyes to Yadis and Josiah. The foyer fell silent as I glided my way up the staircase and wandered through the twisting galleries of family portraits. The shapes tucked away within the maroon wallpaper formed dancing little spirals leading back to my nightly safe haven. Veronica slept, her auburn hair peeking from the duvet. The comfort of another person being there lent to a swift whirl of sleep. Night crept on until something stirred me from my dreams. Paws hit the floor outside my bedroom and jogged to the other end of the hall. I quietly maneuvered from under the sheets and tiptoed to my door. I questioned myself what I was doing, but the unmistakable clinks of a dog collar emanated through the hallway. My hand moved without thought, unlatching my door. I tried my best to peer down the hallway, but couldn't make anything out in the pitch black. I looked like a total cliché as I grabbed the electric lantern from atop my dresser and slowly wandered down the passage in my blue robe. I finally managed to reach the corner of the hall and gazed down at the end. Pouring at Veronica and Jacob's door was Zeus. His little claws dragged on the door as if desperate to escape the darkness of the mansion's hallways. "Psst, Zeus!" I loudly whispered in desperate bid for his attention. My voice bounced off the mahogany walls. Zeus lunged his head back to look at me in the moonlight. Something was extremely off about that movement, almost as if he didn't know his own strength, breaking his neck to look at me. His eyes pierced through the insidious darkness, just staring at me. He finally stood up and turned his body around to face me. That's when I noticed what looked like foam spewing from his mouth in the shadows. "Zeus, come here," I worriedly whispered at him. His voyeuristic gaze was lured away from my presence, drifting towards the deep black hallway behind me. That's when I heard the pitter-patter of paws and the clinking of a dog collar skulk behind me as Zeus and Veronica emerged from the hallway. "What are you doing, Amy?" she asked. I froze, looking at Zeus, who had arrived with her, now standing at my side and peering down the corridor. I couldn't respond to her. I could only point at the other dog lurking at the edge of the shadows across the hall. Veronica's eyes went wide as she noticed the creature within our mansion. It began to lurch forward, as if just learning how to walk. Its broken waltz faded into the shadows of the hallway where the moonlight couldn't reach. Zeus let out a deep growl as the creature merged into the murky shadows. We could only stand there as still as the dying air until a crackling made itself known. My eyes ignited with fear as the crackling source conjured into view. Brokenly lunging down the hallway was the twisted, unearthly silhouette of what should have been a person. Its arms extended before it with disturbing cracks as its spine and head slithered in unnatural motions. Veronica hauled Zeus into her arms, sprinting down the hallway with me in tow. A rage of clawing tore through the hall as I tumbled down the stairs after Veronica. We stumbled down the curving corridors until we made it to the grand staircase. Upon reaching our exit, that creature let its sickening rage known with one final wail rippling through the foyer. We stumbled out of that house and into my car, leaving that mansion behind in a crazed hysteria. We ended up at a motel, running on nothing but pure and unadulterated fear. That night was accompanied by paranoid bouts and a lack of sleep. Our week was spent slowly going insane, locked away within a single dingy motel room. The only thing either of us could think about was Jacob's return. That day couldn't inch closer in our minds if it tried. On the day of his arrival, we called Esther Linklater, a local medium. After hearing our story, she promised to escort us back to the mansion. The state of that damn building when we met up with the sweet old woman was disturbing. Claw marks down the hallways, paint scratched off the wooden doors, every single door busted open, and The Lamb blaring through my laptop speakers, its haunting reversed song slinking down the mansion corridors. It goes without saying what the source of the haunting was, and the medium left with the lamb securely tucked in her bag. I don't know if she still has that cursed disc with her after all these years, or if it made its way into someone else's life. I can only thank her for removing it from ours. But on that day, Veronica and I learned the disc's true intention. Jacob's car was parked in the driveway, but he was nowhere to be seen. To this day, he remains a missing person, a sacrificial lamb. Veronica and I paid for our lives with his. Regret is an unbearable thing, a torture no one should be burdened with. Its crushing weight is only staved off by the hopes that he is somewhere better with our Father. Whoever owns that disc now, do not play it. Good evening, guys. I just wanted to stop by and say thank you for the support. But I also wanted to remind you guys that we have t-shirts and other designs available on Bonfire. If you want to support me, this is one of the best places you can go to, though I do also have a Patreon. If you're like me and love the great outdoors and want to protect it, one of our t-shirt designs, Bring Back the Wolf, helps the Rewilding Institute, which helps protect and bring back damaged ecosystems and species across the world. Also, if you want to hear more from me narrating horror stories, please feel free to check out my first ever audible book narration, Primitive War Dispatches: The Hunting of Stalker Force, the link of which will be in the description and comments below.